Welcome back. We will continue working on our game in Unity here by adding a script to the player. Now, what we want to do is control this marble so that we can move it around our world. In order to do that, we need to add a script. And so the scripts sort of add functionality to our game. So let us go here and click back on the assets. And so we've got our materials and our scenes. To keep things organized, let's add a new folder called scripts. And once we've got that, let's go into the scripts folder and add a C# script. So the programming language in Unity is C#. And once we create that, let's call this the Marble controller. We can edit this script. Now, over here, you can see that this is what the script has at the moment. This is sort of that boilerplate, the base script that every script, when you create it, comes with. What we want to do, though, is edit it. And you cannot do that in Unity. So when you double click here, it will open up Microsoft Visual Studio. And once that pops open, we'll be able to edit our script. Now, we'll just give it a second here. And hopefully it pops up. There we go. A couple things to keep in mind. First off, don't worry too much about what's going up here. We do want to make sure that it says using Unity Engine. That will ensure that all the properties that come with Unity, sort of the script components that come with Unity, are accessible, and it will also assist you as you're sort of typing out the code here. The other thing to make sure is that the Marble controller here, its name, matches up with this class name here, Marble controller. If these two are different, the script will not work. And this is a very common issue. Students forget to name it. And so this says new behavior script. Then they change it. They change it in Unity. It changes here, but it does not get changed here. So just make sure that those two match up. And of course, it is case sensitive. Now what we're going to do is put something in called a rigid body. And a rigid body is basically something that allows us to apply the physics engine to that object. So we'll give it mass, it will respond to gravity, and so on. I'm going to create a public variable, and don't worry too much about this. Usually I would make this private, but for our purposes I'll just make the public so it's easy for us to see what's going on. And of the type is going to be a rigid body. And notice it's helping me out here. There is rigid body 2D. We're not doing a 2D game, so we're going to do a 3D rigid body. So make sure you're selecting that one. And just for common sort of abbreviation, we'll give it the name RB. So we have a variable called RB. It is of the type rigid body, and we've made it public. So what we're going to do is actually see what's the change that is done in Unity. So make sure you save your script. You'll notice here there's a little star. We've made a change, so we need to make sure that we save that change. Otherwise, we won't be able to see the update in Unity. Then we will go back to Unity. So I'm just clicking on the Unity, and you can see it sort of updating. This should just take a second here whenever we make a change to the script. And you can see that that change is reflected in here. Now, what we're going to do is click on the marble, and what we want to do is add this as a component. So we've already had these base components that came in when we created the sphere, but we can add more components by either adding the component down here, or since we created a script and the script is considered a component, just dragging that into here. If all goes okay, if there's no errors, you should be able to drag it in without any problem. If it prevents you from doing that, there's probably an issue with the script and you need to go back and fix it. Because we made it public, it just makes it really easy for us to see right here that it says RB, that's the name we gave to it, and then it says none rigid body. So what it's looking for here is a component called rigid body. We haven't added that yet. Now, just before I do that, if I lifted this up into the sky, okay, and then I hit the play button, which is just in here, so let me move this over out of the way. Okay, move that down. If I hit the play button here, what you'll notice is the ball just sort of hangs in the sky. We are now sort of in our game window, and this is our game playing here. If I hit play again, we go back to our scene window, and you'll notice the ball is just, again, sort of sitting in midair there. What we have to do is add a physics component to it. So I'm going to go add component, and you can search here by just sort of typing in, And so I'm going to add a rigid body. Again, be careful not to put the 2D because we are in a 3D game. Rigid body. And it provides some things like mass, drag, angular drag, and a bunch of other properties. We won't worry about those yet, but it sort of put the base ones in, and we're good with that. The big difference now is when we hit play, it will react. It has mass, so that ball will actually fall to the ground. We can't control anything yet. We still have to use our controller or program our controller, but at least it's reacting to physics. So let's go back to our script. Make sure you turn off the play button. If you make any changes while you're in play mode, they don't necessarily save. So just be careful there. Turn off play mode. Now I'm going to go back to my script and open it up. What we want to do is at the start, we actually want the code to basically attach the rigid body to our RB. We've got to let it know what the rigid body is. So I'm going to set here RB is equal to or assigned to, and I'm going to do get component, and you can see it's kind of helping me out here. I'm going to grab the component rigid body, which sort of makes sense because we've added that rigid body component. Now it's going to go look for it and be able to access it. So basically, you always have to think that the code doesn't really know what's going on. You have to tell it. So it needs to be able to say, hey, there is the rigid body component. I'm going to grab it. So let's go save this and just see what's happening in Unity here. And so if I go back, what we'll notice here is that we had applied the script. It says none at the moment, but we have the rigid body here. As soon as I hit play, that start function runs. That's why it's called start. And it puts that rigid body in here. Now our code has access to the rigid body components. So let's go ahead and use that ability to move this ball around. What I'm first going to do though is get the controller to work. I'm going to change this to fixed update, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but that's basically to make sure that the physics works along with the 30 frames per second, which is what Unity uses. So anytime we use physics, we should make sure that we've got a fixed update rather than just a regular update. I'm going to put a float here. So float is a decimal number, and we'll see why in a second. Move horizontal. And so this will be allowed to give us our horizontal control. And I'm going to use the old style, the input.getAxis. I think it works well as a beginner here. And we're going to call this horizontal. Make sure you spell horizontal correctly, including the capital. We're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to do a float move vertical, and we'll do input dot get axis, and we'll use the vertical one. And again, make sure you spell vertical correctly. Now, before we let us create another variable here that will hold on to these two values. And so what I'm going to create is a vector 3. That is an x, y, and z. So that's why it's 3 vectors, and vectors representing sort of the directions, horizontal, vertical, and sort of with the height as well. And so what I'm going to do is vector 3, I'll call this movement. And what it's going to be is, I have to say new vector 3. So we're going to create this vector 3 here, and it's going to include the move vertical. Okay, so that part's right. Helping me out here. The horizontal should be, sorry, this is messed up. So this should be move horizontal first. That's going to be our X movement. Our Y is the vertical. At the moment, we don't have any vertical movement, so I'm going to set that to 0. And then on our Z-axis, which is sort of into the screen, that will be our move vertical. So I'm going to leave that like that. So what this is doing is it's sort of summing up these two movements to give us the movement of the ball. Now, before we actually apply that to the ball, let's just take a little look at what's happening here. So I'm going to do a debug.log, and I'm going to look at that movement. This will place this information into the console and sort of let us see what's going on here. So let's save this up. Again, make sure there's no errors here. If there's any errors, pause the video and take a little look and see what you've typed wrong, perhaps. And we'll go back to Unity. And in Unity, when we hit play here, what we'll see is in the console, we can see that it's saying 0, 0, 0. And this is being updated in live. So like it's on my computer, it's 11:40 and so many seconds. And then that's what's sort of showing up. I'm not pressing any keys in my game. So the move vertical and the move horizontal are both 0 values. I'm going to make sure I've clicked into the game here. And then I'm going to start pressing the arrow keys. What if I press to the left? What you'll notice is that the X value, so X, Y, Z, the first value there, our X value, is -1. If I let go, it kind of jumps back to 0. And if I press the right button, what value do you think you're going to get? That's right. It's going to be a +1. And so that will sort of allow us to control the ball to move left and right. Same thing if I click the up arrow, which is sort of going to go back sort of into the screen, if you can sort of think of it that way, that will affect the Z axis. And you can see that goes to +1. I let it go, it goes back to 0. And then if I press -1 or down arrow, it will go to -1 on that axis. So that would be sort of coming towards me. I can press a combination. So if I press forward and to the right, I'll get positives on the X and positive ones, I should say, on the X and the Z axis. The Y value never changes because we don't have any control for that. So that's what's going to happen. We're basically pressing these keys and it is assigning a value to either the X or the Y, or sorry, X or the Z axis, and then that will allow us to move the ball. So let's actually go and do that. So I'm going to hit play there just to turn the play off, go back to the script, and for the moment, I'm going to turn this off. So I'm just going to turn the debug off just by 2 forward slashes. That comments that out. We don't really need that anymore. And we're going to actually go in and add force. So I'm going to do an RB dot. Now we're not going to do the velocity there that's suggesting. We're going to do the add force. And so basically we're going to push it. And we're going to push it based on the movement. So I'm just going to type that in. And then that should be good. So rigid body, so we're acting on the rigid body. We can do different things with the rigid body, and one of them is sort of push it, and we're going to push it into the direction of the movement. So if I'm pushing, to the right and forward, then the ball is going to move off into the distance. And we'll see that here. So I'm going to make sure that that's saved. Control S will also work there. You'll get used to that. Go back to Unity. I'm going to hit play. Now the console won't be showing me anything because I've turned off the console. Okay, there is the ball. I'm going to move it towards me. So I'm going to press the down arrow, and you can see that ball moving slowly towards me. Okay, and I press the up arrow, and I can kind of stop it. There it is. And if I press the left, it moves to the left. And if I press to the right, it will move to the right. Now, obviously, we need the camera to sort of move along with the ball, and we'll get to that. But the neat thing is now we have control over the ball. Not perfect control. It's a little slow. So let's actually go and fix that before we sort of finish up this video. So I'm going to hit play again. I'm going to go down to my script. I'm going to come up to here, and I'm going to create another public variable. And I'm going to call it, I'm going to make it a float, and I'm going to call it speed. And what we'll do is come down to where our movement is here. And what I'm going to do is multiply it by speed. That way, our movement, and we can think of it as the moment sort of like 1 at the maximum, we can make it 2 or 3 or 4 by multiplying in that value. So I'm going to save that there. Go back to Unity. I made that public, so what you'll notice is that over here, there is now speed. Notice it's 0 by default because I didn't assign a value. What do you think is going to happen when I multiply something by 0? Yeah, it looks like I've broken it. I'm pressing on the arrow keys. Nothing is moving. And that's because we're multiplying that force by 0 and therefore giving it 0 force. So what I'm going to do is bring that up. I think 5 is a good number, but we can try it. You can put whatever number you think works there. I'm going to hit play. I'm going to see what it does. Yeah, it's a bit more responsive. Okay, the camera still doesn't move with it, but that's okay. And then I'm going to just say goodbye to the ball. I'm going to let it fall off the screen. Whoo, off it goes. All right, and you can actually see the ball falling. The Y value is now changing, and it would keep falling sort of forever. All right, that's pretty good for the moment. We'll add a few more things in the next video.